Hey y'all, this is Fantasia and this is Sewing with Tay. Today I'm going to be making a bucket hat that I found on SewCiety online on movefabrics.com. It's a free download. It comes with all the sizes, so small through extra large. I chose to make my bucket hat satin lined because I like to protect my curls. So here is my bucket hat. It is satin lined and I like to use Ankara or T.A.E fabric. So this is my mud cloth inspired fabric. This size is a large and it's actually pretty big. It fits over my afro and that never happens. So I'm going to show you the steps on how I made this cotton satin lined bucket hat. Follow along. So this is the SewCiety website. You're going to go to movefabrics.com, click the tab at the top that says SewCiety. Use the search bar to search for the bucket hat, but I will put the link to this in the description below. So you're going to get to the article. It's going to give you some details, suggest some fabrics that you could potentially use to make your bucket hat with, some technical sketches for reference. And then you're going to scroll all the way down. So when you scroll down, you're going to put your name and email here, subscribe and download, and you'll have the file emailed to you. It's going to come in a couple of pages. This is what it looks like taped together. It comes in a bunch of sizes. I picked the large size. Here are my pattern pieces that I've cut out and my brim. So we're going to get to my fabric. I cut out 4 pieces of the brim in my self fabric. They're already interfaced. This here is the middle section of my hat. I forgot to interface these pieces, so I'll do those off camera. Here are the lining pieces for my satin lining, and then I have a satin lining for the top and a self fabric for the top. So here you're going to put the pieces together 2 by 2 and sew the sides of the brim, sides of the satin lining. Also, there's 2 sets of brim, so you can just sew on both. So we're going to quickly go to our machine and do a lock stitch. So we're going to take 1 brim and 1 middle piece. I like to flip the brim so the right side is out and then stick it upside down into the brim, just like this. And then pick it up from the inside and line up the seams. You're going to pin them so the seams are aligned. I like to pin both sides and then work my way pinning across the seams all the way around, just kind of stretching. You might need to add a few clips to make it fit nicely. Then you are going to sew along the edge. Be careful to make sure you move your fabric so you don't sew on your brim. And you're going to do the same thing, but instead of using the self fabric, you're going to do it with the lining fabric. So now you have 2 pieces, 1 brim attached to self and 1 brim attached to the lining. Now you're going to take the top of your hat, the circle, and the circle for the lining, and you're going to attach it. The way I like to do this is flip my hat inside out and then put the right sides together using my pin and just slowly work the circle around. Again, depending on your fabric, you might need to add a few clips and stretch and pull when you sew this to make sure that it fits in nicely. You'll see me in a few seconds just adding a few clips just to make it fit just a little bit easier so there's no pleats or anything in the top of the hat. You're going to repeat this step with the lining top and then sew all the way around. Here it's very important that you pull the bottom of the hat around when you sew. Make sure you do not sew on the brim of your hat. So pull it around to make sure it's flat. So you'll see me as I'm sewing these, I'm kind of pulling the bottom edge away from the needle. So here, pull and shift just to make sure that it's completely flat going under the needle. So now you'll have two separate hats, one that has a lining top and one that has a self top. The way I like to do this next step is to put the hat flat with the self, flip the lining side so that it's on top of the self, the satin side touching the self fabric, and then you want to pop it on top and then line up your seams. So you'll see me here lining them up, pin at your seam allowance, and then once you get those pinned in there, you're going to work your way around the edge of. Then you're going to sew around, leaving like a 2-inch gap. Once you have sewed it, you're going to find your gap and flip your hat inside out, carefully making sure not to rip your seam. So you're going to flip it out. Once it's completely inside out, you're going to stuff the satin inside, find your hole and put a few pins there so that you can make sure you sew it closed when you do your top stitching. Once your hole is pinned closed, then you can work your way around, pulling out the seam allowance. I forgot to cut my seam allowance before I flipped it, so cutting or trimming your seam allowance will help this process be a little bit easier. But for now, I'm just going to continue. You can just pull out your seams, you can hit it with an iron and make sure that it's flat, and then you're going to add a stitch right around the edge, about 1/4 inch from the edge, just to close your hole up and add the first line of the top stitch. Once you finish adding the first edge stitch to close up the hole, you're going to have to decide what you want your top stitch spacing to be. For this hat, I only did 1/4, which was quite a few rows of stitching. On some other hats, I do 1/2 inch, so whatever you choose to do. But you will just continue to sew around the brim of your hat, 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch, whatever you decide to go with. Just make sure that it's neat. Make sure you clip your threads so they don't get stitched over and become sloppy. So you're going to sew all the way up until you get to the satin edge. And there you have it. There's my Mood SewCiety bucket hat. Please like, follow, and subscribe.